Hi, it's Khaliah. Today I want to give you an opportunity to ask me anything in reference to real estate investing. I'm a real estate investor coach located here in Washington, D.C. I've been in the business since 2003, and I've pretty much done a little bit of everything. So I've done flipping real estate, managing properties. I also co-own a real estate brokerage, so I've trained people as far as sales. Also training investors. So anything and everything in real estate, I've probably tried quite a bit of it. My focus is mainly residential. So I haven't done too much commercial, even though I've done like the leasing side of it, not so much the sales side of it. So if you have anything real estate related that you'd like to ask me, feel free to go ahead and drop it in the comments. While you put your comment or your questions below, I'm just going to take an opportunity to answer some questions that I've been seeing recently. So again, if you have a question, go ahead and drop it in the comments and I'll go ahead and answer it. I'm on for about 10 minutes and I like to answer any question that you have in reference to real estate investing. So one of the main questions that I get is, do you need a real estate license to invest in real estate? Or is it best to start with a real estate licensing course in order to get familiar with real estate investing? And so for that one, we were chatting about it in the group a couple days ago. I think that it depends upon what your goals are. Of course, you don't need a real estate license to invest in real estate. So again, it depends upon what your goals are. Because when you take the real estate licensing course, a lot of it is more formal education. So like, what is real property? What is a fixture? Things like that, more like definitions and laws and ethics and things like that. So I would say that if your goal is not necessarily to work with clients, or you don't think that you're going to be really using your license, then maybe then it's not going to be helpful for you at the time. But again, it depends, because for myself, for instance, I actually do a bit of both. So like if I'm looking at properties, a lot of times I'm looking at them from an investment standpoint. So if I go meet with someone and let's say I'm meeting with them and they tell me, okay, well, this property, let's say it's only worth $100,000 for investment purposes, but they want, let's say, $150,000, and I know that I can't give them $150,000. So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and say, okay, well, I can list your property at $150,000 since I have a real estate license, and I'll go with that from that perspective. So having a license does open up more avenues as far as generating income for yourself. But again, there are certain liabilities that come along with having a license, because, for instance, if I did decide that I wanted to purchase that property, then I would just have to disclose to them that I actually hold a real estate license, and so I would have to include that in my contract. So that's the addendums in DC. Of course, it depends upon what the laws are where you are. But for myself, for instance, if I wanted to purchase that property, I would have to disclose, even if it was an LLC or whatever the case is, still I would just have to disclose that I was a member and I hold a real estate license and I'm licensed in this state. So really it's as simple as that. And then also too, it depends upon your relationship with the broker, because in this instance, I'm actually like one of the owners of the brokerage. So I'm not paying any extra commissions and things like that. But of course you would need to have a conversation with your broker to determine whether or not you would owe a portion of a commission, or what happens if you decide to purchase your own property. Do they feel like they're entitled to a commission, even if it's like listed for sale by owner, if it's listed off market, or if it's something that's listed on market? How is that going to be handled? So that would be something that you would have to work out with the real estate broker. But I do think that having a license can be beneficial, because again, you can list properties if you want to. You'll also have access to the MLS, the multiple listing service. So like, let's say, for instance, you're looking at properties, you can run your own comparables. It's a lot easier when you do have access to the MLS to be able to run those numbers versus trying to, use these other internet websites, or, even if you're trying to work through another agent, it doesn't mean that that person's always going to be available. So I would say that having a license can be beneficial. Now, I do know some people on the other end of the spectrum that are real estate investors, and they don't want a license because they feel like it's too much liability. And I guess also too, they feel like they're not going to really make use of it, because of course too, having a license, you have to pay your licensing fees. So there is a renewal fee. How often depends upon where you are. Like where I am, for instance, it renews every 2 years. So you have to pay to renew the license. You also have your continuing education So you have to take continuing education classes. Let's see what else. And then also, like, as far as your subscriptions, like if you're a part of a real estate, like a membership, let's say you're part of the Realtor Association. If you're a realtor, you have to pay for that. So there are certain fees that come along with maintaining a real estate license. So I just say that it depends upon your personal goals and whether or not you really feel like you'll make use of that license and whether you have the time. So some people, for instance, may feel like they don't have the time to actually even work with clients. Like, let's say if I told, just in that example, like I told you I would list somebody's property. So in that instance, I would actually be representing the owner of that property. So of course there'll be certain responsibilities that come along with that, as far as putting the property on the multiple listing service. Let's say the person may want me to have open houses for them, putting up for sale signs, looking over contracts, coordinating settlement. So there are certain responsibilities that come along with having a license and representing individuals. And so if you know that that's not your personality, then that may not be something that you want to do either. So I think that there's no one size fits all. So it doesn't mean that just because you want to invest in real estate, now you're obligated to get a real estate license. I think that it's more of a personal case where you have to look at your situation and figure out, you know, do you have the personality to really work with people? Do you have the time to work with people? And are you willing to invest what it takes to actually take the courses, take the real estate licensing test, and also pay the fees and things like that to maintain a license? So I just wanted to answer that question, and thanks for hopping on. If you have any questions, I'm just kind of going through some general questions here that I've been seeing frequently. You can just go ahead and drop them below. You can go ahead and type in your questions, and I'll just go ahead and answer them. And so I guess what I'll talk about now is more so, because I don't see any questions yet. So I'll talk more about what happens if you don't have a license. So again, a license is not required. So there's different avenues that you can take. And one of them would be somebody that's, let's say, for instance, you're looking to wholesale real estate. Wholesaling is just a matter of finding people who are motivated to sell their house. So let's say somebody's going into foreclosure. Somebody's like in the army and they're being relocated. I mean, it could be anything. But somebody who needs to sell and they pretty much need to sell fast. And those, if you're wholesaling real estate, you're looking for those individuals, you're meeting with them, you're getting their property under contract, so you're making an offer to purchase their property. And then instead of you actually purchasing the property, so instead of you taking on the liability of getting a loan, having the credit and things like that, you're not settling on the property. What you're pretty much doing is taking your contract and you're reassigning your interest in that contract to, let's say, a rehab or somebody that's going to come in to flip the property. So that will be one avenue. And as far as wholesaling, you don't need a real estate license for that. So no real estate license is required. Now, the wholesaling, some of the benefits of that is that you kind of get to learn, you get your feet wet without actually taking on the financial responsibility and also taking on the ownership responsibility of the house. Because in this instance, you're actually like looking at the property, you're negotiating with sellers, you may be estimating repairs. So you're doing all of these things, especially like, let's say later on you want to go on to flip properties. Well, in this instance, you're basically like evaluating the opportunity so that you can pass it off to a flipper. So then when you're ready to go ahead and take on these responsibilities for yourself, let's say, you know, you're working on your credit or whatever the case is, you can be in a better financial place so that you can decide to do this later. So, okay, so she's asking, so wholesaling will be one way that you could go on with investing without having good money or good credit. That's one way that you could go about it, is with wholesaling real estate. The difference is that with wholesaling, you're not actually owning the property. Another one is like a property scout. That's somebody who's just looking for people who are motivated to sell. That's another type of investor too. But you're not actually owning the property as well. And then you have flipping. That's the big one that most people are primarily interested in. Even with flipping properties, if you find something that's a good deal, typically credit is never really an issue with that. And the reason why is because there's always people out there who are looking to make money. And primarily with flipping, they're looking at the deal. So they're looking at the numbers in the deal, like as far as what the profits are, how long is the holding cost, how much are the repairs and things like that. So even like, for instance, if you come across a property that can be flipped, it may be easy for you to just partner with somebody else who does have the money. there are lenders out there who do provide like funding for deals where they're not, I mean, of course they may have you personally guarantee it. So they may ask you, let's say if you were dealing with a hard money lender. I don't like hard money lenders, but in those situations, for example, they would ask you probably to personally guarantee it, meaning that they're going to ask you for your credit and those type of informations, because if they don't get their money out of it, they're going to pursue you personally. But typically when they give money in those type of situations, they're not looking at what your debt to income ratios. They're not looking at that. They're looking at the deal, and they're looking at whether or not if they foreclose on this property, are they able to get their money back out of it? Because typically those loans, or like let's say for hard money, for example, that's why I don't like these, because they charge really high interest rates. I mean, normally an interest rate is like, I don't know, maybe even like 13%, something like that. Sometimes higher depending upon where you are. But those loans are for pretty much under a year. And most of the time with hard money, they really don't want to lend money to people unless you've done probably about three flips on your own. So normally too, they want you to have a track record. And that's why typically when you're first starting out, let's say if you want to flip properties, it's easier to start off with wholesaling, where you don't necessarily need to have any income. You don't need to have any credit. You can kind of get your experience underway, and then also you can build up your network of other investors. And then once you build up your network, then it's easier to get into the flipping side, but probably partnering with somebody else. Let's say there's plenty of investors out here who are doing deals who probably have $1 million in the bank. That's not, especially where I am, for instance, in DC, it's not hard to come by somebody that has like $1 million in the bank who's flipping real estate. That's not very difficult. So there's plenty of people out here who are looking to make money. So if you find, like, let's say, for instance, if you're wholesaling and you find somebody who has a property, and you get it under contract, then you can approach you can approach a rehabber and ask them if they will partner with you on a deal, and you don't need any credit or you don't need any money and things like that. And let's say you just tell them that you want to learn. There are people who would probably give you a smaller percentage. Like let's say you got 10%, maybe even more, let's say 20%. I'm just kind of throwing numbers out there because it's all about, what you're able to negotiate with the person that you're bringing to the table. So typically the situations where you do need money, so let's say, because money is always a hot topic when it comes to real estate and real estate investing. But you'll find that if you find great opportunities, money is not as much of an issue. I've done deals where I brought a deal to the table and I didn't put in any money and I was able to make money out of it. But again, it's all about having the deal. So it's all about finding people who are motivated to sell their house and looking at the numbers and be able to make an opportunity out of that. So I was going to say, so the typical situation where you would need credit and you would need money as if you were going in from a traditional standpoint. So most people, when they think of real estate, they think of, let's say, for instance, you were buying a rental property and you were buying just like a regular single family house or something like that. In those situations, if you called up a regular lender and you said, okay, well, I'm buying a second home or I'm buying an investment property, those lenders are going to want you to have credit and they are going to look at your debt to income ratios and things like that. So if you're going from a traditional standpoint, yes, you do need money and you do need credit. But if you're going more of a creative investor standpoint, as far as like wholesaling, looking for deals, trying to negotiate with people, get your feet wet, looking at opportunities, in those instances, you don't need money. Some other ways to go about it, some people get into like your seller financing, and that's a situation where you're looking to buy a property from an owner, but the owner is willing to hold a note on the property, meaning that they're willing to hold, like let's say they own the house free and clear. They were trying to sell for, let's say, $100,000. Maybe they may hold a note for 90% of that and you come up with 10%. Or you come up with 5%, they're holding a note for 95%. So in situations like that, yes, you don't need credit unless, the person that's holding the note decides that they want to run your credit, because of course too, it's all negotiable. Some owners are willing to like hold notes where you can actually, and that's what people primarily do in commercial real estate. Primarily in commercial real estate, let's say there's a certain amount due or they want like a certain percentage, and the owner may also hold a note for another percentage, and then you're coming up with a smaller percentage to get into the deal. Another instance where you don't need credit and you don't need a lot of money is lease options. Lease options is another way of investing. So we've already gone over a couple. We've gone over wholesaling. I mentioned property scouts. We've talked about flipping. And so we've talked about your traditional rental route where you would need money and credit. The other one where you don't need, again, is lease options. And lease options is pretty much that's where people also call like a rent-to-own situation. So I'm sure most of you guys have heard of rent-to-own, where you're looking for properties that are like a move-in condition, and you offer the owner, the landlord, a certain amount to rent to own his property, but then you bring in a tenant buyer who's going to take over your interest again. So you can also wholesale these. Most people call it like a sandwich deal, because you're on one end where you're making a contract, or you're getting into a contract with the owner to rent to own for, let's say, a lesser amount. Let's say the rent, there's different ways to go about it. Actually, there's 3 ways to structure it, but let's just say on average, you're going to rent the house for $500, and let's say they're going to let you do a rent to own. The lease option is for like, let's say, I don't know, maybe $200, right? Then you may find you a tenant buyer, because it's a rent to own. They're willing to pay $1,000 for that rent. So again, you got it for $500 a month. They're willing to come in at $1,000 a month. So now you have a difference of $500 that you're looking at making. But then also, we talked about the lease option. Let's say it's $200 with the owner. Well, somebody else can pay you more. So you could charge somebody else like, I don't know, maybe even like, let's say $1,000. I mean, I'm just making up numbers here. But basically, you can also make money with lease options, and where you don't need money, you don't need credit. So there's definitely plenty of ways to get into real estate. Real estate is definitely creative, where you can get in and you can make money, where you don't need much credit and you don't need much money. And I say that overall, it's just about getting in and starting somewhere. So whatever you see is going to be easiest for you, that's definitely where you want to start. And then work your way from there, because once you get in, then other opportunities do come about from that. So once you're in the business, you're getting to meet people, you're learning, and so other opportunities do open up from that. So it says, so do you need credit, stellar credit, or with someone? Okay, so I just answered quite a few of those, but I did record, so you can go back in and check that out, because we just talked about you don't need credit. I went over like several different options. We went over lease options, seller financing, wholesaling, and how flipping works. But definitely, if you go ahead and, because I see you just hopped on, but check out the video, because we just talked about that. And also, we're going to talk about it again in more detail this Saturday and Sunday. So if you like to know, if you watch this video, I'm sure you'll still have tons of questions, and I don't mind answering them. So what I definitely suggest is go ahead and watch the video. Thanks for hopping on. And then what we'll do is on Saturday and Sunday, we'll spend more time and we'll hash out these different investment strategies and everything. And so the seminar or the webinar is going to be online. I'm going to drop the link in tonight. But the webinar is either going to be on Saturday. It actually is going to be 2 days. So it's going to be on Saturday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's going to be on Sunday. So actually Sunday will be a repeat. And it's going to be live, but the same information. The same webinar, but for those who may miss it on Saturday, you can hop in on Sunday, and on Sunday it's going to be at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So again, Saturday 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then Sunday 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So go ahead and hop on either of those days. I'm going to leave the link in tonight where you can actually hop on and learn more about getting started. So we're going to go in more detail. But if you have any other questions, Hussein, definitely check out this video so you can see some of the answers that we just discussed. And then again, make sure you write down even more questions, and then you can bring those on Saturday and Sunday. So I look forward to having you on. And again, if you feel like you have any friends and family that would gain value from these videos in the group who want to know about real estate investing, please go ahead and add them in so that they can gain value as well. Okay, and bye-bye for now. Enjoy the rest of your day.